I think if I could learn anything else, or if I could go back 25, 26 years now, I would just say this would have benefited us more than anything. Prepare quickly. Don't hold on to it. Don't shut down.
That's a gift. Reconciliation is a gift, and we have to see it as that, whether it's in your marriages or with people that are closest to you. It is a gift, and it's actually what Jesus did when he came and he died on the cross. He was reconciling himself to us.
What is the number one cited reason for divorce in America? It's not finances, it's not infidelity, and it's not falling out of love. Welcome to the Good Life Podcast, where today we're talking about communication issues in marriage, and Julie is back with us today again. We're going to lean into you a lot in this episode because we're going to talk about communication, which obviously leads to conflict a lot of times. And related to communication, it's not that we're scared to communicate, it's we're scared of what may come of that communication related to conflict. And so this past weekend at the church, we talked a lot about, we've got communication issues. And I think even when I was studying this whole thing, one of the things I realized is how much it really is just correlated to the way we're wired and our differences. And so kind of catch us up on what journey you're on right now. About, 5, 6 years ago, I came to you with a book and said, this is pretty interesting here. It's on temperament and communication. We've had a lot of fun with that. We started teaching a lot of that to our church. We had people talk to us a lot about how they could see us doing this as a job or whatever. And now here we are almost 6 years later. It's really become a passion of yours. So talk to us a little bit about what you're doing. And if I need to probe so our listeners understand what you're talking about, I'll be happy to do that.
So I did. I latched onto the book that you brought. It was a kind of a workbook book, if that makes sense. But it was called I Said This, You Heard That by Kathleen Edelman. And I just really started studying that, dug deep into it, read the kids' version of the book as soon as it came out. But along with that, several years back, I decided to go to counseling and was just looking for a counselor and doing some research on that to figure out who I was going to go see, and actually found a temperament counselor. And so that took me on an even deeper journey with more information, more personalized to me, where I took an assessment and actually had my temperament laid out before me, and it was so accurate. And from there, I just was fascinated with the study, the content, everything. And so last January, I started teaching along with Tanya one of the pathways for I Said This, You Heard That, and just really felt like, okay, I want to learn more myself. I want to be more equipped, more qualified to answer questions, to direct people, guide people, because we were seeing a lot of couples come to us and ask some really in-depth questions. And so I actually entered into a program where I could get a temperament certification to walk people through temperament therapy. And so I've been doing that, almost completed that. And then just recently was emailing back and forth with my advisor. And she said, do you realize you're not too far off from having your master's degree? And I was shocked. And so it just, for me, I've enjoyed the study so much, what I'm doing. It doesn't feel like school or work, or I actually crave to do it and love setting aside time to study and just understand more. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm on a journey now. I've got about 6 classes left to complete that master's degree and be a licensed clinical pastoral counselor.
Yeah, so that's interesting because that's probably not something you saw yourself doing 20 years ago.
No, well, it's funny. I have a funny story about that. When I transferred as a junior into the university I was going to attend, I knew I wanted to be a teacher, and I went, they had orientation where you're signing up for your classes and everything. And they sent me to the actual business, advisor was not there because I wanted to teach business classes. She was out on lunch. So they sent me to some random person, and I was like, listen, I need to be out in here 2 years, I need to get this degree. And she was like, oh, honey, you're going to be here for at least 3 more. And I was like, I'm going to have to pick a different major then. And she was like, well, what do you want to do? I was like, I don't know, I guess psychology. So I actually walked over to the psychology lady, started talking to her, and she was telling me, oh, you can do this in about 2.5 years. I was like, okay. But then the other lady came back for lunch and I went back to teaching. So
Yeah.
I've been teetering that fence, I guess, all my life.
Yeah. So we talked a lot about psychology during that season of your life. So you used a couple keywords at Relevant Church, which is kind of what we do in this podcast. We unpack some of the things we've talked about in previous messages. And so you talked about pathways a little bit, and we just believe everybody's on a different journey in their walk to get closer to Jesus. And so our pathways are marriage and family, freedom, Bible, different pathways. And we find that we have an incredible interest in the marriage and family pathways. And so you've taught that I said this, you heard that, which I want to come back to. You've taught how we love, which we've mentioned on this podcast before.
I actually haven't taught.
Oh, you were not?
Like,
Yes.
no, I taught the 5 love languages.
5 love languages. We've also launched How We Love, which we've done together. Now we're doing How We Love Our Kids. There's all those things. And at the core of all of that curriculum, first of all, really at the core of all that stuff is underlying the idea of how we're wired.
Yes.
At our very core. So you use the word temperament. And tell me a little bit, when I say temperament's kind of a new word to a lot of people, I want to make sure everybody understands, but how's that different than personality?
Yeah, so personality is, well, let me start with temperament. Temperament is your your inborn wiring. It's how God created you in your mother's womb. It's there from the beginning. It's not necessarily shaped by your environment and things like that. That's your personality. That's how you respond to those things. And so a good example is like you can meet someone and you're like, oh, they're really outgoing, and then when you start talking to them, you realize, oh, they're really not outgoing. Maybe they were just doing that in that situation, and that's a personality trait that they have. But their wiring is who they are. It's how false. Yeah, it's how we respond to the people, places, and things around us. And so this is why you can have 2 children who've had the same experiences in life, and they respond completely different, or they act completely different. That's their temperament.
I've said that before. You can have even twins. You can have, we got 2 boys about 4 years apart, a little over 4 years apart. One of them's wired a certain way. And we're like, man, they are different. And it's not personality, because we could see it early in life, very early in life. You can see by the way they eat their food, by how structured. I mean, our oldest would put his little cars in a line. Everything had to be perfect.
Yes.
Our youngest can't find his shoes. I mean, he never has been able to. And so you could definitely start seeing some of those things. And I think that was another thing, as they got older, became teenagers, you were more and more fascinated with. So one of the things about the book, I said this, you heard that, well, we got a hold of it. It's about communication. That's the primary thing. But you have learned, we've all learned, but you're digging in more about how we have multiple lanes, multiple experiences. I don't want to get too much into that. I just want to say, like, you're not the same in every situation. And based on there's 3: control, affection, and social settings, you may respond differently. And generally, we'll hit some of the 5 temperaments here in a minute. But I think one of the things that has been remarkable for me in this season is, as we've gone to counseling, as we've dealt with our temperaments, not only has it interested you, but our 18-year-old is going to pursue his, license in counseling as well because of this. And I think personally, it's been because, not to take credit for it, me or you, but like he's watched us wrestle and become better people, become better human beings, interact better. He's watched, especially with me, my interaction with him, substantially better. And so those are the types of things that I think have benefited our family related to this temperament.
Yeah, he is definitely pursuing that, and it really came out of what I felt like was kind of out of the blue. We were walking through, when he was dual enrolled in college, we were walking through, okay, class choices, and I said, hey, you can take a psychology elective, and I was like, this is basically the only one that's going to fit. And so he took it, and I remember, like, just for him, he started talking to me about it, started communicating with me about it. And I originally thought he's gonna hate me for suggesting this. But then I think the more that I dug into it, we started talking about it and communicating with both of our children, and really around the dinner table, at restaurants, where we're riding in the car, we talk about, all of our family and how they're wired, because they kind of gone on this journey with us, some of them. And so really for him, it was very enlightening and I think fascinating. And so, yeah, it's funny. We're in school together, I guess.
That's great. Yeah. I heard us talking about it the other day and how y'all approach it differently. I think we'll get into temperament. We'll laugh a little bit at the end. I want you to stick around for that. But like conflict is really why we run from communication. I am wired to run directly into conflict, which is great in the idea that it can be resolved quicker. It's the negative side of that is that you can also blow up something. And so our counselor told you this. I was not in the room, but I learned this later. She looked at my temperament and she said, in the lane of control, which I think this is fascinating because I'm saying this because it was insightful to me to see the dark side of my temperament, but also what your temperament can look like under the submission of the power of the Holy Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, meaning all those things are a hard or what are causing you to rethink the way you're wired and pull away from the dark side, submit those things to the power of the Holy Spirit. But she literally said this to you: if outside of the power of the Holy Spirit in Carl's life, he is wired to where he could be Adolf Hitler.
Oh yeah.
Like, and I was like, that's scary. I never thought about that. But the premise here is like, it does show the power of the Holy Spirit at work in your life, because she's like, she went on to say, you can clearly tell in my life that those things have had to have been submitted in that lane of control.
Yeah, and it's similarly to what you're talking about. She spoke something very, very similar to me, but it was probably one of the most defining moments in my journey in counseling, and probably one of the things that has impacted me the most. And she said, we were talking about my wiring, my temperament, and I can be very hard on myself and so I mentioned to her, I have this list of things in my head that I need to work on, that I need to do better at. She kind of gave me a weird look and she's like, what are you talking about? Like, who makes the list? And I'm like, well, I do. I make the, like,
You don't have any list in my
doesn't everyone have a list? And she was like, no. And then we kept on with the conversation, and she, because of my tendency to really look down on myself or be hard on myself when things aren't perfect or when things aren't smooth, she told me, she said, Julie, your weaknesses are where the Holy Spirit goes into your life. And that's who the Holy Spirit, how the Holy Spirit operates in your life. It's not to overcome these weaknesses. They're always going to be there, but it's, you have something to lean into, and that's the power of the Holy Spirit. And it totally changed how I view the Holy Spirit, how I view myself, the weaknesses that I struggle with. It's like, because I just always felt like, oh, it's kind of my cross to bear. That's, my issues, they'll always be with me. It's going to be this lifelong battle, blah, 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 blah. But she offered me hope in that moment. And it was revolutionary for me as to how I understood myself and also the power of the Holy Spirit in my life.
Yeah, so we've done a couple of marriage conferences, and one of the things we say is you got to know yourself and know your spouse as well as you know yourself. So when we talk about communication, let's get to some of the content, because now we've kind of laid the introduction. I want to make sure we have some time to talk about just how different temperaments interact at the end. Because the thing happened with me is I have learned my dark side. Your dark side is different in the sense that, like, you're self-critic. My dark side is the emotional things that come from
the external, mine's internal.
Correct. So
people see yours more. It's on display more.
yes.
Yeah, mine is more inside of me that I deal with.
Yep. So all of them, not all, a chunk of my weaknesses can be seen very much as like you said, on display for everybody to see. But then other people can be struggling with just as dark of weakness, but they're not shown for everybody. And it's wild. So in marriage too, that's a huge issue. And so we run from conflict. And you made a few notes, and you kind of walk us through these. Conflict is not optional. Avoidance is optional. You can choose whether you're going to have conflict. You're not going to get away from it. You can try to avoid it, but that's a choice. And you're talking about, we got to engage. And there's 3 things you put down. Avoidance always leads to distance. Talk to me about that one.
So when you avoid conflict, which this is me, I'm speaking to myself, because I'm generally wired for peace and calm and low stress environments. And so when you avoid conflict, you actually just create distance between you and your spouse. There is something powerful about having conflict in your marriage and bringing resolution and being able to move forward. It builds trust, it builds unity. And so if you avoid the conflict, you negate the opportunity for those things to happen. And so I'm not saying it's easy. It's, it's easier for you to engage in conflict than it is for me, but I had to learn there is benefit to engaging in conflict
quickly.
Yes. And within a, reasonable amount of time. Yes. When the dust is settled, when tempers aren't high, when people are more at a level field, emotionally, engagement is an opportunity. And avoidance takes away that opportunity.
And I think we spiritualize this way too much in the sense of like, just pray it. They're not at some point, like it is, you have to, we talk about exposure there. You got to try some, you got to keep doing these things. You got to put yourself out there because naturally, if you're wired like yourself, you're going to avoid and create distance. That distance can create assumptions.
Sure.
I start assuming, why are you pulling away? You start assuming, you bury something and now you start looking at me going, well, why is he doing this? We'll talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's easy to project things onto your spouse when it's when you're not having conversations, when you're not communicating. And so that's why communication is so important, so that we get to the truth, we get to the facts, to the basics of what has happened. But if you're not engaging and you're avoiding this conflict, you're left with your own thoughts in your mind, right?
Yeah.
And that can lead you to a very dark place. And so assumptions are never good. It's better to take it and hit it and say, okay, we're going to have this hard conversation, and just realizing it's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy.
Yep. I think it's funny you say this because like we talk about assumptions. You've heard me vent and like, you're my safe place. And you're like, you can't say those things. I'm like, no, I'm just saying I'm here to get them out. And what you will pick up on a lot of times when I'm venting is assumptions that I've made about a situation. I'm like, well, they did this and this is what they meant. I don't understand. And you're like, go talk to them. I'm like, yeah, but then they don't like, because I'm the boss in a lot of situations or the people, somebody looks up to. I'm better at conflict when it's parallel conflict, or if I'm the one underneath authority and going to the authority. I'm worse at conflict if I'm the authority because I worry about what people perceive of my temperament. And so when it comes to assumptions, man, I can make a lot of assumptions because I haven't had the conversation.
Yeah, you can get on a train where your thoughts will just lead you to like, well, this and this and this. And I'm like, hey, we're just at point A right here. Like all this other stuff hasn't happened. Those are just what ifs.
Yep.
Those are possibilities. Let's have a conversation. And that's where your temperament is more like, boisterous than mine is. And I think that's a good compliment that we have. It's like, I can say, well, let's figure out how to have a conversation before we just assume that
it taught me off many ledges.
Yeah.
I think so. We laugh about this, and I know we can get into deep, and people can kind of check out processing. But I just want to say, like, you got to learn, like, even in those situations, like when you start submitting those things to the Holy Spirit, when you can laugh at yourself more. You can go, oh, and now it's not so offensive. Yeah. It used to be offensive when I felt like people would talk about my negatives.
Well, and this is where it's important. Like, you can learn about yourself, and I'm certainly an advocate for that. But you also need to learn about your spouse, because this is where you become a helpmate, a support, a partner for your spouse. And you can see their temperament, the weaknesses or the things that they need to work on. You can see those as their spouse and say, hey, remember this about yourself. And I mean, you've said, we both had these conversations and said, hey, wait a second. It's kind of a pause or a break. And we do laugh about it. You'll laugh at me like putting a decision off or, and stuff like that. But that's where you compliment your spouse and you can help them.
And you don't have to change them. I said this past weekend. You don't have to change them to be like you.
You
love them. Yeah, that's why 70% of the time you're never.
And that's another thing you have to realize. You are not going to change your spouse.
You have to love them for them.
It is inborn. It is God wired inside of them. And so you're not going to change their temperament.
Yeah. And that can't be an excuse for them to live in a certain way, but also can't be a weapon for you to say, well, you got this problem.
Right.
It's a loving people through that. I will say this about assumptions real quick, and then feel free to comment. When I started understanding how you're wired more and more, and how my words affected you and how my actions affected you, it cut way down on the assumptions. Mm-hmm. And then when I stopped assuming, I started seeing maybe a little more of your hurt, a little more of maybe your wrestling, your processing. And I'm like, I don't want to contribute to something she's up. Because if you're going to go through this spiral of like self-criticism, why would I want to add to that? And so I didn't know that. It could come off as stubbornness at times. And I'm like, I know she's really stuck in this process of like, what do I really want to say? How do I navigate this? And now I see that differently.
Right.
And I quit assuming obviously we all still assume some, but the more we engage, the more we talk about it, the less assumptions are made. And then, so we have distance, assumptions. And if we stay in that cycle, it leads to resentment.
Yeah.
This is what we find more often than not with couples.
Yeah. If you're not engaging in conflict, at least one person is suppressing things. It's being stuffed down and it's being internalized, while probably the other spouse has said all the things, many times, and it's been like this display of, emotion and rage and anger and frustration, and it's been very loud, very, very ongoing, while the other person is continuing to internalize, and that the person internalizing can obviously have resentment. The person who has been very vocal and expressive can also have resentment for the lack of engagement that the other person's having. So it's not good. And then you go through years of resentment, and that's when the kids move out, people are done.
Yeah.
And they walk away, or they quit and they say we're just not.
So let me be a psychologist right now. And in the message I said about 7% of communication is actually words. And while we're talking, I'm watching your body language, and you said, the person who's internally burying in, you're kind of doing this. And you're like, the person who's put it all out there, and you're literally pointing at me. And so it's like, I'm just saying that to bring attention to the fact of how different we're wired.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I'm the one that's like, just puts it all out there. Like, and then the resentment sets in for me if you just don't acknowledge, if you don't engage. Just like, she don't even care enough to engage. You're like, he don't care enough to slow down.
Yeah, it can appear very dismissive, the ones who don't engage, and then the other party can be like, well, they don't care enough about my feelings to even talk about this or whatever.
Yeah. And so we talked about how I use this statement to you a lot, and I didn't realize for a decade or more, feelings aren't right or wrong. They're just feelings. But there is biblical proof for that. I want to talk about it a little bit. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry. I've always said anger is an emotion, a feeling. I'm not going to try to add to the word of God or take away, but you basically can take that same theology, that same approach, and say, don't let the sun go down while you still have heightened emotions towards someone. Whatever that is, get it out. The sooner, the better, before the sun goes down. Not because anger itself or emotions, I've said it before, anger is not, feelings aren't right or wrong. Emotions aren't right or wrong. They're just feelings. And what that Ephesians is saying, and that later it gets into building one another up, which is good for them, not yelling and pulling people down. We read that Ephesians 4:29. But it's not because anger is a sin. It's because unresolved anger becomes poison. And so now all of a sudden we're carrying stuff overnight that God never meant. And then all of a sudden we're evaluating our spouse the next day, or our kids, or anybody. We're dealing with this. And I would just say it's a good practice at the earliest opportunity to have a conversation. You need to have a conversation. Yeah. Now you may have to table the conversation and say, well, let's get back to that. Let's enjoy our day. And let's make sure that we understand we're working toward resolution. That takes time. That takes maturity. And so you wrote down 2 imperfect humans doing life together through the daily ups and downs is just a recipe for conflict.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think we go into marriage with unrealistic expectations. And unfortunately, the way we date when we're younger kind of sets this up for this. I will just say this. I was not prepared for kind of the letdown of the hurt and the frustration, because we did not have so much of that when we were dating. We had some, but it seemed like we were able to work through that. When we were married, I just was not prepared for that. Like I just didn't think. I guess I was kind of lived in oblivion that things would not. We wouldn't have those types of arguments or whatever, and so I was not prepared for that, and engaging in that was very hard.
So let's go back. We dated for 6 years before we got married, and got married out of college, right in the ministry. I'll speak to a little bit of that. As an only child, a lonely, kind of person growing up, I was searching for someone that, and to find a deeper relationship. We were friends for a couple of years before we started dating. So we had a deep level of a relationship before we ever started dating. And in that, though, we would date and I would see signs, or you would see signs, And I think I can only speak for myself. I'll be like, well, that's not going to be a big deal. She'll change over time. And you assume the exact opposite of what we're talking about. You assume, no, they'll come closer toward the way I do things. And I think you probably overlook some of the same, like boisterous, charismatic personality and be like, yeah, it's just, whatever. As we get older, we start having kids, we get more mature, you start going, yeah, those things aren't going away. Yeah, kids, the mix, more conflict. And so we get married, move to Nashville, we're there for a couple of years. We do have conflict, because we're just all of a sudden living in the same house, trying to do life. And now we got jobs and money and all that kind of stuff we're dealing with. And we just assume it's going to go away, and doesn't. It piles up. And now all of a sudden there's conflict, there's frustration. I'm animated more than I was when we were dating. You're shutting down more than you did when we're dating. And now it's like, how do we get here? And we're good friends dating for 6 years. Here's what I would say. We had advice, but nobody told us the hard things. Nobody had a podcast like this one going, good luck. They're just not going to change. I mean, within reason. Right. They can submit things to the power of the Holy Spirit, but there's always going to be the dark side. Their natural tendency is always going to be to go back to what their wiring is. And so we talk oftentimes about the expectation gap. What you expect versus what you experience. And that gap is just what we simply call frustration. I expected one thing. That's not what I got. The higher my expectations or the lower the experience, the bigger the gap. And so I think that's what happens oftentimes early in marriage, and then people don't know how to close the gap.
Yeah, I don't think they recover.
Yeah.
And, some people will make the decision to stay married, but not recover well from it and not really engage in, hey, how do we fix this? I think they just settle and they think, oh, well, this is what life is. This is what marriage is. And then, several years, they have kids, and several years down the road, they're like, I can't live the rest of my life this way. And that's where we see divorce. I think other people early on, they just kind of throw their hands up in the air and they're like, I'm done. I can't do this. And so it is hard work to talk about that expectation gap. And again, and that requires communication and healthy communication, and understanding that you can close the gap, that things can be different. But it takes a lot of work.
Yeah. So a couple thoughts on that. And then we'll jump into these temperament, why communication breaks down. We'll spend 20 minutes there. We're done. So I think when you talk about the early, like people throwing up their hands or walking away, I would say that anybody who's single thinking about getting married, you need to know your temper, but you need to know everything about your temperament, the good, bad, and ugly. And you need to talk about, what needs are being met, how they're being met. What do you expect from your spouse? Because if you don't know that, all of a sudden you get two people that have totally different expectations and don't even know themselves and know why they have those expectations. Yeah, and so I wish we'd have had this conversation. So I said Sunday, many communication problems aren't love problems. Most of them aren't. They're assumption problems. Those assumptions come from our natural wiring. So we're about to get into some technical stuff here. All I can tell you is in a few months, probably by the end of this year, we'll have 2 counselors on our staff, including yourself and one other, that will be able to walk people through temperament fully and help them understand. So give us 4 to 6 months, and we'll be able to do some of those things. But for now, let's just talk about it and kind of whet the appetite as simple as we can without getting too, for the average me watching this right now going, that's way too complicated. I don't know, like how I want to dumb it way down. So we talk about temperament theory and how God created people with different internal processing systems. Yours is not right or wrong. It's just different than mine. So if we're going to communicate properly, we got to engage. We talked about that. We can't avoid. Peace is actually built through effort, not disconnection and not silence. And then we got to recognize each other communicates differently. We have internal and external. So I'm just going to walk through the 5 key temperaments. I'll call the name. You tell me these 2 things. Tell me the public display and then the internal need. You can unpack them however you want, but we'll go quick. Choleric, which, full disclosure, this is what I am when it comes to being in control. This is what makes me a natural wired leader. So talk about that.
Yeah, so a cleric is a big personality, typically. They make great leaders. Most of your presidents are choleric. But their public behavior is they lead. They're great leaders. Now many times they can be damaging with their leadership. But they are driven, they are wired for success. And they love leading. Now, their need that they have, their basic internal need, it's control.
Yep.
They want to be in control, and they don't want others to have control over them.
So it's funny you said that. A couple thoughts just about, as I studied for temperament, many times the very first one they even talk about is the choleric.
Oh yeah.
It's like the one that rises to the top because everybody can go, yeah, that's a type A personality.
Yeah, and if of all the temperaments, like they caution you not to diagnose or not to project somebody's temperament on them by the way that they behave, because behaviors are not necessarily temperament. They're not learned. Yeah, and they can be masked and things like that. And so they really lean into the fact that you should take an assessment to get your accurate temperament. But a choleric, if you watch a choleric, if you are in a social situation or a stressful situation, you can almost tell who is choleric.
Especially if it's a tough decision to be made.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And you can tell who's not choleric.
Right, because they just sit on the wall.
Well, they just don't want the responsibility and make the decision.
Or they'll look to the choleric.
Yeah.
They'll naturally know. So here's what you said. You said, we're going to go through these, and then some of these sound like awful. Mm-hmm. Like it literally says, my internal need is control. Mm-hmm. Well, that's horrible sounding, but it can be used for good.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And like the one thing about a choleric is they are intuitively right most of the time. They know
we laugh about that all the time.
Yeah. And the clerics love that,
Right.
But they know that they just have a bend towards the right thing to do, especially those clerics who are Christ followers. And so that's why they make great pastors or great leaders of ministries and things like that, because they can make decisions and they can lead people. They can inspire people. They're very charismatic and influential. And so there is a great side to every temperament, and there's a dark side.
Yeah. So they're task driven, task oriented, less people. And this is what I've had to learn is like, I pastor people, and I've just said, look, I want to meet the needs of those people and not let the dark side of my temperament. I can't. If I'm with too many people for too long a period of time, it drains me because there's always a task to be done. There's always something to be done. And so I've had to find that balance. Direct communicator, like they don't really beat around the bush, which is interesting because there's different lanes of temperament. In my affection side, I'm not near as controlling. Mm-hmm. I'm more just kind of like, what does everybody need? But when it comes to making a decision, leading, getting to the next place, I'm a cleric. Again, don't want to get too technical, but there's multiple lanes of these things. I process externally. This is also why I walk into a room talking. This is why sometimes I'm literally thinking while talking is my way of thinking. Mm-hmm. Even for these podcasts, I'll put down a few notes and it's like, how do you talk so much based on 2 bullets? And I'm like, I'm processing out loud. And then I move fast. And here's the dark side. I can be harsh, sound harsh when stressed. I don't even mean it sometimes, but to the other temperaments who aren't wired like me, they can be like, watch out. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And so that's the idea though, behind the control, the dark side of that can be control. Somebody's got to be in control. Somebody needs to take the lead. And I mean, if not, we all just kind of wander around. So that it's not that like, that's a negative thing altogether. It just means you got to understand that you can't feed that beast to always be in control, because here's what happens. Tell me if I'm wrong on this, but the dark side of a choleric unchecked is a narcissist.
Yeah, and they can use people as a means to an end.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, it's about the task. And if there's a person that can help them get to the task or accomplish the task, that they can be seen like that. And so, again, that's where the power of the Holy Spirit has to come in and soften that choleric and help them not to be so abrasive and abrupt with people.
And if you're choleric in the lane of affection, especially, you can be very impatient with your spouse. You can be very loud and obnoxious and demanding if you're not careful. Okay. Sanguines. This is a bit different. These are the fun people. These are the people you want there at the party. Tell us about them.
Yeah, these are the people that we need in our life to bring joy and laughter. And we actually have one that lives in our house. And I knew when he was born, he was different. And it's because he's a sanguine. And so they are all about people. If you ask the sanguine, hey, you want to go here? You want to do this? The first question they're going to ask you is who? Who is going to be there? They don't care what you're doing, what it's going to look like. They don't need an agenda. They don't need an itinerary. It's who is going to be there, because they are all about people. And so they are our connectors. You're going to see them in public places. They'll be the center of attention. Another way that you can pick out a sanguine and again, the assessment tells you more, but they usually are drawn to bright colors. They'll wear bright colors in situations, and so you kind of look at them and say, you know what, I've seen them in bright colors all the time. They're possibly a sanguine, but they just love people. But their internal need, they're driven by attention.
Yeah.
They want people to pay attention to them, to notice them. And they can actually experience a lot of anxiety and depression if they're not getting attention.
Yeah, or if they're getting the wrong kind of attention.
Yes, and they can turn to immoral behavior or ungodly behavior, unhealthy behavior to get attention.
So let's play a game here for a second. Let's say you have a choleric and a sanguine. The choleric wants to be in control. The sanguine needs attention. I don't want to go that far too, but you can see where that's an issue.
Sure. I mean, they could definitely
Compromise.
They'll battle it out. They could reach a compromise, potentially.
But what would what I'm trying to say is, what would the controlling nature of a choleric do to an attention-driven sanguine? The need to please, the need, and now to even be controlled, because they just want that attention, they just want that validation.
Yes, yeah, that can be very damaging, because it can put the sanguine in a tough spot of kind of making a decision themselves. Do I please this person?
They do the right thing.
Yeah, and they're very drawn to like the approval of others, so they seek approval, so they will do behaviors and things that gains that for them.
So when I talk to our youngest, who is the sanguine, he has 3 outfits. They're all different colors. That's the just he's the guy with smiley faces, the smiley faces on his hoodie. He just that. Yeah. Everywhere he goes, he's in a group. He sits them on. If we go to a basketball game, you're gonna go sit with the crowd. You're exactly right. And we're like, hey, do you want to go here? He said, who's going? He never says, where are we going? He doesn't even care. He's like, who's gonna be there? And when I come off harsh with him, or I tone my my tone down with him a lot, because if you bring attention to the negative sides, it hurts them.
Sure.
And so I've kind of had to learn that. I'm just thinking, I'm talking with him. You're not a sanguine, I'm not a sanguine, but I've learned with sanguines. Wow. One harsh word, the wrong tone, even a misunderstood conversation can make them shut down.
Yeah.
And which is way out. And they're the purest joy people on the planet.
Yeah. They experience fun and joy more than anybody. And they tend to have a positive outlook and a positive, assessment of the world.
Yep.
And they don't like the negativity.
Yep. So I'll go through it. They're relational. They're an emotional processor. They talks to understand feelings. They don't just sit back and think. They're just kind of processing. They need connection. And many times we found this even with staff who were sanguine. They'll talk. We go, what do you want to do about it? They're like, I don't know. I don't have a solution. I'm just talking. And they actually have the ability to reach solution. That's not their game goal though. They're just wanting to be heard. Sure. So, all right. The third one, we'll run through these. Melancholy. That's a long, big word. And what does it mean?
So, melancholy is known as like the dark mood. So melancholy sometimes get a bad rap, but they're definitely perfectionists. They like things perfect, and so they want a sense of order, in a sense of they do not like chaos, and so their internal need is driven by that order. But these are people who can come in and bring excellence to a situation, to the table, because they just are perfectionists.
And they don't want to establish the order. They don't necessarily want to be in control of the order, but they like to make sure everything's orderly.
Yeah, they want, yeah.
Okay, so this is also I don't remember all of Jace's temperament, but we saw some things in him specifically about he's orderly, but he also, sometimes you're like, hey man, what are you thinking? And so you got a little bit of this in you too. It's like, okay, what's going on? What are you thinking? What's got you kind of shutting down? What's got you kind of...
Yeah. So if you ask our oldest any question, his first response is, I don't know.
Yep.
And it's like, no, you do know. You're just not saying.
Highly intellectual.
And yeah. And like, it very simple questions all the way to ones that are thought provoking. I don't know. Where do you want to go to eat? I don't know. What do you think about, what's going on in the world? I don't know. No, he has very strong opinions.
Exactly.
But he's not feeler driven, and melancholy is not necessarily feeler driven. They think about things and they process internally. And so, yes, they need more time to process things, especially bigger things, and come out with what their feelings are.
I remember thinking when Jace was growing up, like, He's 14, 15. You know, he's never going to know what he wants to do with his life. He was thinking about it the whole time, processing the whole time. But when you'd ask him, he's like, I don't know. And all of a sudden, he's like, here's what I'm going to do. I'm like,
Yeah.
and we also realize once he reaches that conclusion, he's reached a conclusion.
Well, yeah, and there's some stubbornness there.
Yeah. So they're thoughtful, they're detail oriented, they process internally, they feel deeply, which is interesting because they don't necessarily appear to be.
Yeah, they don't show that. What they show is less expressive when it comes to their feelings.
Yeah, and
they only show those feelings to a small group of people.
And they can become critical if overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So they don't throw a bunch of curveballs, don't overwhelm them, don't pressure too much. They'll be in control, they'll get it done.
These are the people who have a standard. It's a very high standard. They have an internal dialogue in their head, and they have a high expectation of themselves to meet that standard. They have a high expectation of other people to meet that standard. And that's where they experience a lot of disappointment, is when they don't meet it or people closest to them do not meet that standard. They don't necessarily verbalize it to people, but it's internal.
So let's talk about the phlegmatic a little bit. Again, these are big words. This is a lot of your wiring, which is honestly what brings so much calmness and peace to our home. Part of the reason that I think, just one of many reasons that I adore you, is I'm like, man, I couldn't do what she does. I couldn't be stable and peaceful. I'm all over the map, and it's just refreshing in some ways. Now, when I come home, I have a little different temperament in that lane of affection. But talk to us about you. This is you, so talk to us about you.
So your phlegmatics are those people who like calm and harmony, low stress, and so that's their whole goal in life, is to live a life that is full of those things, because they really have an avoidance to anything chaos or stressful or high intensity. They are just not those people. And in my studies, I've read numerous times, phlegmatics are your most balanced temperament people. They don't ride the highs and lows. And so they are pretty stable. They are not necessarily emotional, but they stabilize things around them. That's like the public behavior that you're going to see with them. They're not your reactionary people. They're the ones that, something chaotic's happening and they're bringing peace to the situation. And so that's what their internal need is the need for peace, harmony.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because I'm gonna give you 4 things, and then we're gonna talk about our relationship a little bit for fun. They avoid tension a lot of times. They're like, why can't we just have peace? Internal processor, and this is something I had to learn about you, withdrawals under pressure. So this is why you withdraw, not because you're female,
right?
Which is, I think, a misnomer at times. You withdraw because you're like, this is just too much. And then you often we've had this, you can be mistaken as uncaring. And I feel like, don't you even care? You didn't. And you're like, yes, I care. That's well, no. I'm like, but you're so like this.
Right. And
one of the things you told me, and it's funny because I think you were laughing about this even recently. We were talking about it. If my internal needs control as a choleric in a lot of areas, and you said, what about phlegmatics when it comes to control? They don't want to be in control, but they don't want anybody to control them. Yeah. So what's a guy like me supposed to do is the question, because I've learned this, but that's somebody's got to be in control. So how do you?
So there's the phlegmatic just wants to be considered or consulted. They kind of want to know what the decision is going to be. They don't want to find out after the fact. And so, they're good with people making decisions. They typically don't want the burden to make a decision, or the responsibility of making the decision themselves, but they do want somebody to include them in the process,
which is very complicated for me.
Yeah.
And same thing,
it doesn't seem that complicated to me.
Yeah, you're like, just ask me out to, but no. So for me, I'm, my internal needs control. You've asked me before. Nicole asked me this, our counselor. She said, "What do you I don't know, maybe you asked me, but through this, do you feel like you have to be in control?" And I'm like, no, but I don't like it when things are out of control. So if things are out of control, I'm going to step in and bring order and control, but I don't necessarily I can follow too. The problem is when it's just me and you, I'm the natural one to take control. But if I take too much control, you're like, I didn't want to do that. That wasn't what I would have done. And I'm like, why didn't you say something? You didn't ask me. I'm like, why didn't they care? I mean, that's the song and dance we did for years. And so now it's more like, what are you thinking? Vacations. I'll tell, hey, let's do it. Ask me in 3 weeks after I process that. I'm like, just make it and so that's the song. But what I learned is if we're not careful, we can say women are complicated, men are complicated. This is how you're born. You're wired. It's a battle you're going to fight, but it's also I've got to learn, just like vice versa on my temperament. But I'm just trying to give that as an example because it can be a big song and dance.
Yeah, and you can enter that song and dance repeatedly, constantly, and that becomes boring, and actually for a lot of people just becomes annoying, and it leads to other issues. And again, we're talking about something very silly in the sense of like planning a vacation or whatever, but you can see with like bigger issues or with like major things that plague a marriage, like financial issues or whatever, where things like this would play itself out, and you see the temperaments at work. And if you don't know your spouse, again, you can go back and make assumptions or avoid and create resentment and all of this. And so that's why it's just so important to do the hard work of knowing yourself and your spouse.
So I'm thinking of 4 things that, like, in this regard, just because this is more me and you, but I think this is true for all temperaments, but phlegmatics especially. 4 things that can really, like you talked about finances. If the spouse is not considered in the financial, or it's like, I don't know how much money we have. I do the finances. You're just like, hey, where are we at on this? What can we do on this? You just want to be a consultant, or, you just don't want to feel like you don't have any say.
Yeah, I don't want the burden of making like decisions for investments. Yeah. But hey, just tell me where our money is.
Yeah. But you also want to know what's going on with our money, so you have peace. Yeah. Second thing is parenting. I think this is a big one for phlegmatics, because you are somebody like, well, let me go talk to him. I'll talk to him when I get. I'm like, no, we got to solve this now. Mm-hmm. So if you have major differences for a phlegmatic, they're like, hey, peace, harmony, that matters. So let's not. So that one. If they feel controlled in parenting, if they feel like somebody's being more dominant in parenting, authoritarian, or I can't remember which one, dominant over the third area, I would say would be like physical intimacy, sexuality, those types of things. Like if they feel like you're being controlled of that, they can be one of those things like, I don't know. And then you got the calendar. I would say the calendar is another one. So if tell me if I'm wrong, like I remember when we first got married, like you want to know what time I was going to be home, how we could plan dinner, what was the, you don't like then curveballs thrown at you on our calendar and our schedule. And I can throw a curveball really quickly.
Oh yeah. You're like, hey, we have dinner with these people. And I'm like, what? When did we decide that? Yeah. Yep. Or I mean, even shooting podcasts, like filming, like I need to know because I'm going to plan my week. You're planning your day.
I'm planning the afternoon.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, because for me, one thing affects the other, affects the other, affects the other. And so, all of that plays itself out.
Yep. And I could easily say, well, but it's like, that's not appreciating who you are.
Well, yeah.
You're natural.
And it's going to cause a lot of frustration for that spouse. And so you just have to realize your spouse is different from you. I'll give you one other example. We mentioned the melancholy earlier, and we have one more to talk about here. The melancholy has a real fear of like financial failure and collapse, and like and so that you can see where if you have somebody who's a melancholy and they have that legitimate fear, and they're married to someone who's a free spender, or who just kind of lives in the moment, which is sanguine, can do that. You can see where that automatically is a recipe for disaster. And so when you have your when you take the temperament assessment, there's actually a graph that's shown, and you can actually look at the graph of one spouse and then the other spouse, and you can almost determine what they're going to have issues about.
Wow.
And so
nobody talked to us about this thing.
No. And I just think that would be so key for we have a huge population of young adults in our church. Like, to have that information is gold.
Well, and your focus is going to be on marriage and family. Yeah. Premarital, that's one of the things you're working on so that you can prepare, because like it will save you years of hardship.
Yeah, I'm so passionate about having healthy families, because to me, that's just the backbone of society, and it makes our communities better, our churches better, and our churches should make our families better. And so that's the goal here. And if you have a healthy marriage, you can raise healthy children.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's hit one more. This is one that I, in a different kind of like at home, or we should say in my closest relationships, I am more of a supine, which is a contradiction to how I am in a leadership role. This is where it gets a little confusing.
It's also contradictory to the choleric.
Yes, it's like, so when I'm home, I know it's not the home, but with you and the boys specifically, and even with some extended family, I'm what they call a supine. So, and this, I don't know, this was unique to me. It took a little while to understand the dichotomy that I live in. But when I'm here with you, with the boys, I have some tendencies. What are the kind of dumb it down to a couple words for us?
So the supine is a servant at heart. That's what you see in like their public persona. These are people who volunteer, who they make wonderful volunteers at like the church because they want to serve. They have a servant's heart. And really what they want, their internal need is acceptance. The hard thing with the supine is they expect you to read their minds a lot. They think you should know what's going on in their head. And a lot of times they can be a victim of a situation because they can have hurt feelings because of the way something unfolded.
Somebody close to them.
Yeah. And so they don't speak up in situations, and then they end up hurt.
Yeah. Well, so this has been a pattern of mine in my life, and I want to get to these practical tools here in a minute. But as a supine, I'm always running around the house. What can I do? How can, whatever the case may be. But that's where some of the codependency came in too. I was doing it for acceptance. Now I need to do it for the right reasons, right? So, but the dichotomy for me is, and you've seen this, and we got, I would say dozens of people at our church today because they've seen this. I'm not the pastor who of a mega church has, a security team follow me around, untouchable, any of that. And we'll have an event at the church and I'm picking up a broom sweeping. We got people in our church today that go, if your pastor can do that, I can come to this church. I'm grateful for the supine in my life because I think in those situations, I see enough of the dark side of the choleric that can be like, I'm the boss. I'll see y'all later. But I think part of the supine lane that I live in is what has helped me to maybe overcome some of the dark side of my choleric. The problem is for years, not understanding temperament the way we do, it was easy to see me just as a choleric all the time. But I can shut that stuff off when I come home a lot of times. Now, if something's got out of control, I can pick that mantle back up. But I think it goes back to, like, I would say, until I understood this about myself, like I do have that tender, gentle side, but it's something that also is very confusing to you, to the boy. Like, how's the guy standing on stage and makes jokes and does this and is very direct, come home and he's a teddy bear or whatever. It's very confusing. And all I'm simply saying is, until I understood that about myself, there's no way I could expect you to understand it.
Right. And just being able to verbalize it and put words to it, he can't. And so that's why the assessments help so much to give you the information, and it breaks down the 3 areas that we're talking about with inclusion, control, and affection. And you know what your temperament is. And some people, you actually have a blend of these temperaments within, a control. They can have 2 temperaments,
That's where it gets clear. Yeah.
It does. But again, that's where the assessment gives you the
and somebody to walk you through it.
Yeah. Everybody that I've ever talked to that's done the temperament assessment and actually sat down with a counselor, they're like, how did that counselor know me so well? And it's from the information that comes from the assessment. It's not watching you. It's what's on there.
So let's say the supine, and then I want you to tell me I want you to answer one quick thing for me. Supine, they're a servant of heart, relationally aware, and avoids asserting needs, meaning a lot of, especially that's not me when it comes to like leadership, but it's me when it comes to like maybe at home. Quietly compliant. I may be doing stuff that I don't necessarily want to do just because, processes internally. This is fascinating because I process externally when it comes to making big decisions and leading, but I process internally a lot. It's like, wow, what's going on? I don't know. And I think that comes from insecurity. Feels unseen, but deeply needs acceptance and often mistaken as a low need. You said something to me years ago. You're like, you just don't seem like you need anything. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like it. And then we understood this and we're like, that's where it comes from. Because it was always seen as the guy who walk on stage, don't need just rolls up in there, walks in any room, talking, make it. You're like, but at home, the closest relationships, like you actually I want to be seen. I do have needs. But if you see me as a dominant, you're never going to stay.
Yeah. So if you were to look at the choleric and the supine on a graph, they're like this.
Yep.
They're diagonal. Phlegmatic's right in the middle. And then you have melancholy and supine that are sanguine that are like this. And so your wiring is,
Wow.
is, you know, very odd. It's rare. And so, like it just requires a level of understanding.
Yep.
And with that brings clarity
Yep.
for you. And it's not to change, it's just to work within that temperament.
The internal battle that I've fought for decades, and you can only speak to your internal battle about self-criticism. That was yours. The internal battle that I fought for decades was, why do I feel this way? Because I'm this like outspoken, give me the problem, I'll give you the solution, we can fix this, whatever. But internally, like in the lanes of affection, I would be different. I'm like, what's, and there's this battle of like, and then when people would just assume I didn't need anything, and I'm like, no, like I'm actually human. And so that was an internal battle. Like, why do I feel so needy sometimes over here when I have no needs in the lane of choleric and anger control?
Yeah. But that's why it's so important to really dig in.
And it was freeing for me.
Yeah. And
it gives me a confidence to actually not feel like I'm just,
or not feel like you're all messed up.
Yep.
Or, you know, crazy, or, you know, so just knowing this brings so much clarity.
Yep. So I said Sunday this, we'll roll it up, wrap it up with a couple practical tools. There's an emotionally healthy model to communicate. Instead of just, why do you do this? I can't believe you do. Like, calm in the right moment. When you do this, I feel this. I wish you would this. I became that was a credible tool for me. Cause like, I'll just say that, just repeat that, because I can get emotionally charged or up or down. How does that help you when I say that? You have to work that's not your default setting. You still kind of internalize and you have to work on that. How has that tool helped us?
So I was actually thinking a little bit about this in preparation for this podcast and after you spoke on Sunday, because I do think this tool of communication has been very beneficial for us. And again, you're an external processor, I'm an internal processor. And so discussions used to be very one-sided for us, where you said all the things and I said none of the things, right? And
you naturally shut down, which makes me continue to pursue.
Yes, yeah. And so this model actually condenses for the external processor, like rather than saying everything all at once,
succinct conclusion,
and being overwhelming the person listening, it actually forces the external processor to condense their feelings and what they're really offended about into this really short statement that's digestible for the internal processor. And so it allows them to understand in a very clear way, this is why my spouse is upset or offended with me. Reverse that. If I need to use this model of communication, it gives me a guide, right? Where
makes it safe.
Yeah, where I actually have to formulate a response, but this is the framework by which I formulate that response and deliver it. It's very helpful. For you, it condenses. It's a formulation tool for me. And I think I was just thinking about now, I was like, that is really powerful for people. If they will latch onto this and they can abide by it and utilize it, and then it just leaves you with a very condensed version of what you have to deal with. And
because a lot of times we get lost in the weeds.
Oh yeah,
you do this, and it made me feel.
Start talking about what happened 10 years ago.
How do I resolve this at this point?
Yeah, and it really, this is a tool for resolution.
Yep,
that's what this is. And so, because I think so many times arguments are just, there are no rules of engagement. People don't fight fair, and it's a free for all.
Yeah. So this makes James chapter 1 verse 19. So the first tool is emotionally healthy communication. When you this, I feel this, I wish you would this. Okay. The James chapter 1 verse 19. It also makes this so much easier. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And so if I'm going to formulate a 3 sentence, I wish you would, that ends with I wish you would, it makes me slow down, makes me process, gets it in a bite-sized nugget so you can process before you speak, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And it diffuses anger
Mm-hmm.
because it's not attack mode. Because one of the things I wrote down is ownership invites understanding. Accusation invites defense. And so, but let's be honest, most of the time you're either on the attack mode or the retreat mode, and that's never a good thing. So the second thing that we learned and we worked with is something we call, I think that's my phone, a timeout with a time limit. So let's talk about that for a second. Sometimes communication gets heated. That's not necessarily failure. It's just the way we're wired. It's physiology. So Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1 says this: a gentle answer turns away wrath. Man, if we could just master that too, like if I'm not in a place where I can give a gentle answer, I cross this threshold or whatever you're talking about, because God designed our bodies to react under pressure. So talk to us about something. This word, we call it a safe word, not in a weird sort of way, because that's the word that's used in all kinds of, it's just a way to say, okay, right now I'm heightened, I'm feeling unsafe. Talk to us a little bit about how we've used that and how that's been a huge help for us.
Yeah, so our counselor taught us not only the tool for healthy communication, but like when you're in a discussion or an argument or, a very heated discussion, and one person is just feeling a little overwhelmed, a little like,
I'm about to explode.
Yeah, like it's just too much. Things have become too heightened. She told us to pick a safe word, and you can say
something that was joyful for us.
Yeah, something that was joyful. So it could be,
beach.
Yeah, like you both enjoy going to the beach, or a vacation that you had, or Disney, you love Disney or whatever. And so it's just a word that you say in the moment when you're just at a place where you need
either amped up or shutting down.
Yes, and like it's not going to end well. So
that's good.
It's a safe word that you say in that moment, and both parties agree. Once the safe word is said, you stop.
Which is also takes discipline.
You disengage from that discussion. And so you can imagine, like your phlegmatics are going to be like, thank God. But your clerics are going to be like, no, I want to keep going, And so it does require some self-control on both parties. But you say that word. And so what you create then is a timeout. It's just a timeout from that discussion, because emotions are high. It's when you're going to say something you're going to regret later, make the situation worse. And so you're like, okay, we just got to stop this for now. But it's a timeout with a time limit. And so if somebody uses the safe word, then they are responsible for coming back when things have settled and engaging back in that conversation within an agreed time limit. Time.
Yep.
So usually that needs to be within 12 to 24 hours, where you re-engage in the conversation with maybe a level head, a clear mind, and maybe emotions aren't so heightened.
So when we first learned that, your natural response was to say, okay, give me 5 days. That was kind of, and mine was like, no, you got 5 minutes, which is unsafe. Because here's what happens for me. I'm going to tell you how this has helped me. I usually come back within 30 minutes to an hour. Usually, if we don't, it's not like we use this all the time, but occasionally we've used it, and I would come back, and here, lay back. If I'm here's what helps me come back quicker. What helps me come back quicker is I get to a draw and think about your water. Think about how what just happened could have created an unsafe space for you, how my actions might have contributed to that. Now I've got to come back. And for me, the sooner the better, because I don't want to process this for 24 hours. I hate that. And so it's like, okay, if I'm going to come back, I got to come back with the idea of resolution. And that requires me to think about what I've said, how I've said it, what I need to apologize for. And also just say, again, maybe when you this in the future, that whole conversation.
Yeah, it's kind of a refocus, because if you're in a situation where you're having to use the safe word, you've probably abandoned when you did this, it made me feel, and I wish you would. You've probably long since said that.
You got off the rest.
Get running down the trail. And so it's just a refocus. And the goal is not, when you come back, to rehash everything and bring up everything that was already talked about. It's to reconcile and bring resolution. And so when you come back, you need to have your head on straight and have your thought process towards,
but you can't come back guns blazing again.
Yeah, because then that's just doing more damage. And so this just helps you to find that space where probably apologies are said and a plan for moving forward is, laid out. And then
and that time out should not be just to cool off. That time out should be to self-evaluate, self-reflect. And this is why knowing how you're wired, not just this is where I am, like knowing how you're wired and how, oh man, I slipped into my dark side there. This is what that did to her, him. I don't want to hurt this person. It also makes you go, I don't want to hurt this person.
Yeah. And it can just be like in that moment, you realize, we're not going to solve this either in that heightened moment. And so we just need a break.
Yep.
We need, somebody needs to go for a walk or go sit on the couch or go sit in the sun.
Go hit a golf ball.
Something,
go hit something.
But you just need a break from that really intense moment.
Which leads to the final thing, and we'll wrap it up with this, is repairing quickly. I think if I could learn anything else, or if I could go back 25, 26 years now, I would just say this would have benefited us more than anything. Repair quickly. Don't hold on to it. Don't shut down. If listeners would listen and say the number one goal of a believer is he's given us the ministry of reconciliation. Reconcile people back to God, reconcile them with one another so that we model that. If we don't do that in our own homes, it's going to fall apart. And so here's what I would say. I'm going to say the hardest thing for me, you say the hardest thing for you. Again, we don't talk about these things a lot. The hardest thing for me about repairing quickly is if I feel like I'm right, then I want to make sure everybody knows that. And so sometimes repairing quickly, that's not the end goal. Being right, letting everybody see your point. But I think that comes from a place of insecurity, so it don't happen again. Right. And so I'm like, I will tend to, rather than repair quickly, like, okay, but that can't be the end all. When I see this as repair quickly, I'm like, if we'll repair quickly, we'll build more trust, and some of that will get better anyway. Yeah. So what's your biggest struggle when it comes to repairing quickly?
I think it's a processing issue. A lot of times for me is like, I have to process everything that's happened, and that doesn't happen quickly for me. I wish it did. But I can't reach a conclusion until I've processed, and that takes time. And so for me, it can seem like unforgiving or unresolved or whatever. And I've had to work on that specifically, but it's definitely a processing issue for me. And I've had to become better at saying, hey, I just need a little time.
Yeah.
But knowing with that, there's a limit to, hey, I can't take 5 days for this.
Yeah.
But you said something about reconciliation, the ministry of reconciliation. And just recently, I was given the opportunity to repair a relationship, a very meaningful relationship in my life. And I walked away from the time I had with this person. And I got in my car, and the first thing that came to my mind was, thank God we live in a world where reconciliation is possible. And so that's a gift. Reconciliation is a gift, and we have to see it as that, whether it's in your marriages or with people that are closest to you. It is a gift, and it's actually what Jesus did when he came and he died on the cross. He was reconciling himself to us. And it just gave me a new picture of the sacrifice that Jesus made for us. But I don't think that reconciliation has ever hit me like it did that day. And just really so grateful that we live in a world that where reconciliation is possible.
Yeah, I think to the average listener, reconciliation is only possible, I think, if both parties are willing to do what the scripture teaches. As far as it depends on you, live at peace with all men. If you're still holding animosity, resentment, until you let that go, and you're never going to do that. And that doesn't mean I know given the situation you're in, we all have faults in relationships. Sure. We're never going to just point the finger at one person, but at the end of the day, like, it took some healing on your part, on that person's part, and just to get some of the emotion out of the way.
Yeah.
But imagine living with person. This, before you know it, is resentment's piled up. Now you're not just dealing with one or two things, you're dealing with a laundry list of things.
Yeah.
And that's why love is a choice, it's not a feeling. So anything else you want to say? I'll close this out. Anything else you want to say?
I'm good.
Okay, so here's what I would say. I got one more thing.
Of course.
I think in 6 months, hopefully ish, give or take, you'll be done, ready to do these assessments in Temperament. You said something to me about how, and our counselors have been informed of this as well, the church, but basically, correct me if I'm wrong, going through Temperament, taking the Temperament assessment, a counselor understanding the temperament of someone, as well as them understanding their own temperament and their merit, gives you the equivalent of understanding of about 7 counseling sessions or something like that. Was that you that told me that, or one? Okay. It was somebody, one of our counselors, we talked about the fact that at the end of the day, you learn more.
Oh, maybe it was me.
I thought so. You looked at me like I was an idiot.
Yes.
Okay. It's not the first time. Just the idea that like before you get to trauma, before you get to some of those things, understanding how somebody's wired fast tracks dealing with some of them.
Yes, you eliminate all the preliminary, like, get to know you, tell me your, you
looked at me like that's crazy.
No,
I'm pretty sure you told me that.
I wasn't tracking with you, but yeah, it eliminates like the digging around and really trying to figure out why that person showed up for counseling. Because some people, there's reasons why different temperaments come to counseling. And if you know their temperament, you can almost determine why they're sitting there. Not specifically, but they're like a sanguine really isn't going to show up for counseling unless like something major has happened in their life. So if you're sitting there with a sanguine and they're just kind of like, oh, I'm just here, you know where to push and pull.
And this is, I'll give you, when you first went to counseling, this is a good example. Your internal processor, your self-critic, the counselor knowing that about you immediately was a game changer on how she approached you.
Absolutely. And you should approach different temperaments different ways.
So I say all that to say, last piece of advice. In the coming months, when the opportunity is there, get with Julie, get with one of our counselors that we 2 certify by the end of this year. Do this. Especially if you're a young adult, you're a married. Spend the money, do the thing, learn more about it. It's going to save you a lot of hardship over time.
Yeah, it's an investment in you, in your marriage, in the relationship. And I'll say this, even if you, an individual wants to come and your spouse doesn't want to sit in a counseling session, the temperament can be done on the spouse as well to help and gain more understanding.
Yeah, you knew about my temperament before I knew about my temperament.
Before you walked into the counseling.
Yeah, as well.
Yeah.
Which is always fine because you're reading me. Yeah, so. But hopefully this has been helpful. I know we get into a lot of stuff in this, but my goal in this podcast, our goal is to give you content that just is life application. Not trying to impress anybody, not trying to do anything. If making a difference, like and subscribe. If there's current events, I know there's a lot of things going on in our country. The right time, we'll talk about those things, but we just want to help you continue to grow in your faith, especially if you call Relevant Church your home, you watch online. Hopefully this is helpful. Like, subscribe, get the word out, and just we'll continue to bring the content as we possibly can. So we'll see you next time on the Good Life Podcast.